Hey guys, so today I am joined by Draco for my intro and outro because we are going to be discussing whether or not hedgehogs absolutely need insects or not. I'm not keeping him out for the whole video because, let's be honest, he doesn't want to be out for the whole video. See, I'm an old man and I have no interest in being your video prop, huh? Alright. So, now that I have Draco back in his cage, I wanted to talk to you guys about whether or not hedgehogs need insects and sort of what my opinion on the matter is. I'm gonna start with a little bit of biology for you guys, and you've probably heard this in my videos before if you've watched them, and that is that hedgehogs do not have a cecum, which is the part of the body that digests plant matter. This means that even though technically we classify them as opportunistic omnivores, they really don't digest plant matter. This means fruits, vegetables, weeds, things like that, green things. They really don't digest them very well. That means that the nutrients that your typical omnivore would get from plant matter, hedgehogs really don't get. Now, they're still classified as opportunistic omnivores because hedgehogs can and will eat pretty much anything they come across in the wild. They aren't particularly picky when they're hungry. This isn't the case in captivity, but in the wild, they are considered pests because they get into gardens and things like that, and destroy gardens, which annoys people immensely. They will eat plant matter if they're hungry enough to do so, and it's not gonna make them sick. It might constipate them if they ate too much of it, but other than that, there's not a huge issue with it. Now, of course, in captivity, this is a little bit different because hedgehogs aren't hunting around for their food. We're feeding them, which means we should be feeding them things that suits their body type the most. So things like meats and eggs and insects. Even in the wild, despite the fact that they will get into gardens and things like that, they are still eating predominantly insects. That's what they'll come across the most in the wild. And therefore, I believe that they should be eating it in captivity as well. Now, I want to put in a quick disclaimer here. I do realize that there are some incredibly picky hedgehogs in captivity. I totally understand that. One of my boys would not eat bugs until he was much older. For like an entire year, I couldn't get him to eat them. I kept trying, but he wasn't interested in anything but his food. So I do understand that they can be picky eaters. Hedgehogs can survive without insects. That doesn't mean that they should if you have the option. If the only reason you're keeping your hedgehog away from insects is because you don't like insects, then that's a problem because you're not giving them their proper nutrition simply out of convenience for yourself and not for your hedgehog. So I don't want anyone to feel like I'm coming for you if your hedgehog refuses to eat insects. I get it. Some of them are incredibly picky. It just is the way it is. But that doesn't change the fact that I think that hedgehogs benefit immensely from insects and should have it if they'll eat it. Even if they won't eat insects, adding something like a chitin powder to your hedgehog's food is a great addition to their diet because they benefit immensely from the chitin. Chitin is insect exoskeleton. It's the shell around the bugs. They benefit from that. It helps with their digestion. It helps with their poops. It's a great addition to their diet. Even if they won't eat straight up bugs, I will show you what I have for when Blaze couldn't eat solid food. So when Blaze wasn't eating solid food, I was actually mixing in some chitin into his diet, and this is just cricket powder. It's 100% ground crickets. I got this online. Humans use this for protein powder, so it's fairly easy to find. Just make sure you're getting 100% cricket and nothing that has any like weird added protein powders to it, because that would be a problem. So that's an excellent way to add some of the benefits of insects to your hedgehog's diet if they refuse to eat them. So to sum up my thoughts on this, because I feel like I've been a little bit scatterbrained, I do believe that hedgehogs need insects in their diet in captivity. I don't think it's fair to them to not give them bugs. I don't think it's fair to buy a hedgehog assuming that they'll be fine on just a cat food their entire lives. Again, I realize that some hedgehogs are picky and you won't have a choice in the matter. If they are picky, you can try something like a cricket powder or a different insect powder and see if that helps. I'm also not saying that a hedgehog is going to die without insects, but I do think it should be an incredibly important part of their diet that you should make a priority. So since I've mentioned that I think it's really important to include it in your hedgehog's diet, I guess I should also sort of go over what they can and can't eat and how much or how little you should be feeding. So hedgehogs can eat just about every feeder insect you can get on the market. It's really important not to give them any insects that come from outside. That's incredibly dangerous. You can give your animals parasites. You never want to take bugs from the outside and feed them to any of your insectivores. That's so dangerous. Please don't. Pet stores often sell feeder grade insects for animals, especially pet stores that sell reptiles, because a lot of pet stores that sell reptiles sell like bearded dragons and leopard geckos and things of that nature that would require an insect-based diet, and so they tend to offer at least a small selection of feeders. I know the pet store near me offers hornworms, crickets, superworms, and mealworms. And the mealworms you have to ask for because they're kept in the fridge in the back. When you get your insects, you can feed them right away, and that makes them healthier for your animals. You can also order feeder insects online. I do that a fair bit when Finn is awake because he goes through a lot of bugs. And you can do that on places like rainbowmealworms.com or dubiaroaches.com. I'm sure there's even more. Those are the two that come to mind right now. Ordering them online can be cheaper and more expensive. It sort of depends on how many you're ordering. If you only have one hedgehog, it's probably best to find an in-person supplier. You can even find them at reptile expos if you have a reptile expo in your area. I know we have one every month, and so if I wanted to get my feeders from there, I could. Be wary of bait shops or bait feeder insects. A lot of the time they don't breed their feeder insects to the same standard as your typical feeder insect for a small animal because they assume that that bait is for a random fish. And obviously, standards for fish that you're going to catch and release or catch and kill and eat are very different than for your pet. So that's something to keep in mind if you are thinking about going to like your local fish supply and getting a batch of bugs from the bait aisle. As far as how many bugs to give your hedgehog, it really varies depending on the hedgehog in question. Take for example my hedgehog Draco. I give him bugs every single day because I think he benefits from having them every single day. However, I give him a fairly small portion of insects every single day because he is a fairly large hedgehog and I don't want him to be overweight. If you have a smaller hedgehog, you can give them more insects without issues. My best advice is to weigh your hedgehog regularly. If you find that their weight is going up steadily, maybe cut back on their regular food or their insects. It depends on what kind of insects you're feeding. If you're getting high fat insects like butterworms or waxworms, feed them sparingly. They're more of a treat than a staple bug, really. So monitor their weight and adjust accordingly. And before I forget, I want to briefly touch on dried insects and canned insects. Now, dried and canned are not nearly as healthy as live. However, you can use them. I know some people, that's the only thing they can get their hands on and they just prefer them. You have to be careful with dried insects in particular because you can cause constipation. They are all dry matter. They have very little nutrition. The only benefit you're getting from them is the chitin, which is the exoskeleton. As I mentioned before, it's kind of the same as adding the powder, except for the powder is already broken down, so it's easier for them to get through their system, whereas dried insects, they still have to break down a little bit. Canned insects have a little bit more of a moisture content and can be easier to digest, but I've found that a lot of hedgehogs don't like them, so it's worth a shot, but don't be surprised if your hedgehog isn't interested. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Draco is ready to go back in his cage. He has no interest in finishing this video at all. So anyway, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all in my next video.